You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Good, palms down. So good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I don't know if this will work right now or not, but one of the things I always, or not always, but I often ask when there are actually people here is I always say, is anyone here for the first time? And then I see people raise their hands and they didn't know that there would be a follow-up question, which is what brings you here? So I'm going to try this even though we're using YouTube and it would require you typing. But is anyone out there possibly here for the first time? And if so, why? And if you want to, probably somewhere on the right side or lower right side of the screen, you could type in, yes, you're here for the first time and why, and then Travis can read it. So if anyone wants to share that, this would be a good time. One of the reasons that I asked that question, and now I'm just stalling to give you time to type. One of the reasons I asked that question is very early on, my teacher used to say, never forget why you first showed up at the temple. And it's been a lesson to me for many years now, and that was 17 years ago. She said that to me as a reminder, because as life continues to bring you challenges and difficulties, or maybe things go well for a while, when you kind of get in that space where things are going well, you might think, well, I don't need to do my meditation, or I don't need to go to my Buddhist place or whatever I go to. And what she always wanted me to remember was that even though things at that moment might be okay, they're going to get difficult, they're going to get challenging, and you'll face obstacles. So it's not about getting to a place in your life where everything is seemingly perfect and then stopping your meditation practice. It's about doing it over and over again so you can prepare yourself for the challenges that you may face in the future. The other thing that comes to mind when I think of that is, I remember this would have been 2000 and, February 06. This would have been 2006. And when I showed up at the monastery in Taiwan, the first thing one of the nuns said to me was, Jeff, whatever you know and think up to this point, forget all of it and just be present while you're here. So I've always remembered that as well, that every time I sit, it's a reminder to ask myself, why am I sitting? And every time I share, it's a reminder to ask myself, why am I sharing? So with that said, was anyone brave enough to say they're here for the first time and want to share why? What do we got, Travis?
We have one. So
we got one. Thank you.
Christina says that she's here because her friends Megan and Roberto invited her.
Oh, very cool. Nice work, Megan and Roberto. And Christina, glad you joined us for the first time. Anyone who's often here or always here, want to share real quickly why they're maybe here. Megan and Roberto are good people, so.
And then Jeremy said, "Hi, Jeff. Thanks for this, brother." And it's his first time.
Awesome. My pleasure. Is it a Jeremy we know, or is it a new Jeremy?
He said it's Jeremy from the Experience Lab.
Oh, what's up, Jeremy? Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
And then Maria Indrawan said, "Hi, Jeff. Greetings from Australia. It's a long time since we sat together."
Omi Tofo. Yes. Say hi to the boss for me. Tell him I miss him. I miss you as well. And we send you lots of love. It's actually funny, and I'm just taking a few moments before we start the meditation, but one of the things I said on Saturday was that there are people who have been a part of the Dharma Bum community for the last, 10 or 12, 14 years, but maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago, moved away and have never been able to participate in what we do. Now that we have so much of our stuff online now, people that we haven't sat with for years are finally, like Trace, with Maria, are finally able to sit with us again. So it's really cool. Australia, what time is it in Australia right now? Let's see, it's 7 o'clock here, 7 a.m. Maybe it's around 10 a.m. or something like that. She'll answer eventually. But thanks for joining us. Actually, Trace and David, they would join us for many years, every year on New Year's, even from Australia. They would sit with us on New Year's, which was really cool. So, all right, with that being said, we'll start with a meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds, right? If you're at home or maybe you're at your office, wherever you are right now, it might not be silent, right? There might be kids in the background, there might be dogs, there might be TVs. It's very different at home than if you've actually gone to a place where it's quiet. So during this time, when you hear the sounds, don't worry about them. You don't need to try to tell everyone to be quiet around you. Just allow them to be, and your practice is to be with things as they are in whatever is happening. Don't expect anything. If this is your first time doing a meditation or maybe first time sitting here with us, it's very important you don't sit there waiting for any grand aha moments or deep realizations. We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion and you want to slide to the front third, push the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever is comfortable. If you're on the benches or chairs, also just try to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the hands. If you need to move during meditation, simply move, right? If you have an itch, just scratch your arm and come back to stillness. Don't scratch your face, though. We need to stay away from that right now. So, most important, don't expect anything whatsoever. I will guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, just settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. And breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, stomach and chest fall. Simply going to continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return attention, focus to the breath. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in, breathing out, follow breath out. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. The practice of meditation is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that happens throughout our day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun, but meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. Meditation's not an escape as often people think it is. Life can be a crazy, hectic mess sometimes. And this is not running from it, but actually opening up to it and being with it as it is. I often talk about Buddhist practice making life more challenging because it's really about being with things as they are. And so much of our lives we spend running from things. And this is to no longer run, but to sit and look at life as it occurs. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. And in reality, not much changed. So it's interesting, I'm glad Jeremy's here, unless he dropped off and quit already, but I doubt it. We were on a call earlier today, Zoom, some of you may have heard of it, and I was asked to come up with a little quote for something I'm doing tomorrow for them. And so I was looking at some quotes, and I always like to use Pema Chodron quotes as well. And so one of the ones that I came across was, it says, "You are the sky and everything else is the weather." And I'm not certain it's best to use for tomorrow, but I loved the quote. And the reason, well, without explaining why I don't think it's maybe best, but I'll just talk about the quote itself. Again, you are the sky and everything else is the weather. And when we face challenges in our lives, like we all are right now, even more so than we were a few months ago, we want to be steady with it. And the weather, it comes and goes. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it snows, sometimes it's sunny. You know, the hot, the cold, all the changes in the weather. But the sky, in its essence, in its nature, is just a beautiful blue sky. I guess nighttime it changes. But the sky is there. And in Buddhism, we call this Buddha nature, bodhicitta. It's often the metaphor I use a lot where I talk about the sun being our bodhicitta and Buddha nature. And on a cloudy day, the greed, the anger, the ignorance, those are the clouds. The clouds block the sun. But when the clouds part, you're left with the sun again. So that sun, that Buddha nature, that sky, it exists as it is. And all the clouds and all the changes of weather will come and go always. And this is the Buddhist teachings on impermanence. And right now we're all facing a greater level of storms than we're used to. And so for me, the practice is to come back to being rooted in that bodhicitta, that Buddha nature, in the beautiful blue sky, and not allow the clouds and the changes in the weather to destroy us. Because they're pretty heavy right now. And they may be pretty heavy for a while. But they won't be that way forever. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 5 years. We don't know. But right now, the practice is to be like that beautiful blue sky, to be like that sun. And then we will be less affected by everything around us, which doesn't change everything around us, but it makes us better at dealing with it. And if you think of everyday life before what we're dealing with right now, we had stresses and pressures and anxieties and worries, and now they're just magnified. There's so many unknowns. And for people which, you know, if this was a normal Saturday or Tuesday and there were 70, 80 people here, and I'd say, how many of you like to control things? This is where you see about every hand. So for those of you who like to control things and like things to be perfect and spend your life trying to make sure it goes exactly how you want it to, this situation right now is an absolute nightmare. Because there's only so much you can do. And so much of what's happening right now is out of your control. Yes, there are things you can do to impact the current situation. But learning to release control is extremely difficult. But the sooner we start to, again, come back to just sitting, breathing, being aware of what we think, what we say, and what we do, then we get closer to being the blue sky or that sun. Every day we have opportunities to explore what are we thinking, what are we saying, and what are we doing, no matter what the situation around us is. And if we're thinking terrible, negative thoughts all day long, then that's how we're going to feel. And if we speak negative, harmful thoughts all day long, that's how we're going to feel. And if we do negative and harmful things all day long, then that's how we're going to feel. There are always positives and beautiful moments to find in any situation. So please find them. They're there. So with that, I always prefer just to stop and open up to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with that you want to ask or share. And we use the rest of the time this evening to address your questions. And I promise to do my best to not answer any of them. And again, you can just use the box to the right probably, or wherever it is on your screen, and type in your question and Travis will read it.
So someone said, hi, Jeff, could you talk a little bit about having a toxic person in your life? I struggle with controlling my responses to their words and behavior towards me.
Yes, the question that comes up only once every 3 or 4 weeks about that darn toxic person in your life. There's a couple things. And the second part was what? Struggling with controlling their
reaction towards their behavior.
So let me talk about the toxic person first, and then the struggle with controlling the reaction. First and foremost is to ask yourself, and there are varying degrees and levels of toxic people. So what I'm about to say, when we're in relationships or dynamics where people are physically, emotionally abusive, this is for those who don't know anything about Buddhism or maybe brand new. The Buddhist way isn't to just stand there and be physically, emotionally, mentally abused and tortured. It's to remove yourself from these situations if possible. That's the most compassionate thing one can do. But let me start by saying this. All of us, if you look at yourself honestly, at some point in time, we were on some level a toxic person for somebody else. And that's very difficult to recognize. And again, the reason I started with there being various levels and degrees of toxicity is, we have people who maybe are being physically, mentally, emotionally abused. And by me saying this, I don't mean that you have physically, mentally, emotionally abused someone. So I don't want to draw that parallel. But anytime we think we're in a toxic relationship, it first helps to ask ourselves, honestly, have we been toxic in our lives towards other people? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. On some level, we have been a toxic person to others in our lives. And if you don't think you've ever been toxic, then please continue to come to this type of practice, because I don't know that you're being that honest with yourself, right? I spent a majority of my life being toxic towards people, toxic towards myself, toxic towards others. So what this does when we recognize that we too have been that person that has caused harm in others' lives is when we face people in our lives who are toxic towards us, it first helps us begin to cultivate a level of empathy and a level of compassion towards them. Because when we were toxic towards others, it was only because we were in pain and we were suffering from our own life. So we brought that pain and suffering onto others. So if you can reflect on yourself in a time that you were toxic towards someone, it's much easier to realize that that person who is toxic in your life is only that way because of the pain they've endured, the suffering that they're experiencing, the trauma, the loss, whatever it is that they're going through now and in their entire life is the reason that they're being toxic towards you. So that's the first part, and hopefully that makes sense. And sit with that for a little while, because often when we ask about someone else who's toxic towards us, the last thing we want to do is recognize our own toxic nature that we have shared. So please sit with that for a little bit. The second thing is then how to deal with toxic people who are in our lives. As I started to speak to earlier, it is very compassionate, if possible, to remove ourselves from toxic dynamics. That's not always possible, right? We may have family, we have loved ones. Most of us have had challenges with, brothers or sisters or sons or daughters or mothers or, fathers, whoever it might be. We've had challenges, and so you can't always just remove yourself from that situation. But often we're in relationships, friendships, romantic relationships where the person is toxic, and the wisest, most compassionate thing we can do is simply remove ourselves from that. If we remove ourselves from it, it stops the person from being toxic towards us, which is a very compassionate act towards them. That's the second part, and I realize I've still not addressed the question, which is how do we control our behavior? The third thing of controlling behavior is no different than controlling your behavior towards anyone else. Everyone who is alive and breathing suffers. So those who are harmful towards you, They need more compassion than anybody. That's what they need. That's why they're causing you pain. It's because they're suffering. They need you to be kind to them. That's what they need for their heart and their mind. If we have difficulty controlling our reaction towards others, then sit more. By sit, I mean do a deeper meditation practice or a longer meditation practice where you don't respond. Just sit, breathe, learn to be still, learn to be quiet. Next time somebody triggers you or is that toxic person, and it's not necessarily physical or emotional or mental abuse, just be with it. I mean, I can't tell you how to control your reactions. You can do that. No book is going to tell you how to control your reactions. No person can tell you, well, actually, that's a lie. Lots of books will tell you how to control your reactions. Lots of people will tell you how to control your reactions. All I'm going to say is learn how to for them. That will control. So hopefully that's helpful. And again, just to stress, if you're in situations, not just you who asked the question, but anybody, physical, emotional, mental, abusive relationships, it's very kind and compassionate to remove yourself from that, if at all possible.
So Patricia asked, what's the difference between think good thoughts and thinking?
What's the difference between think good thoughts and thinking? Well, Patricia, you've had a lot of thoughts today. Even in the 20 minutes of meditation, you had a lot of thoughts. The Buddha talked about thoughts being pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. My first teacher always said, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's why I always say that. That to me is all the Buddha's teachings summed up in one little phrase. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's your karma, that's your action. What we think, what we say, and what we do is what we bring into the world. So the question of what's the difference between think good thoughts and thinking, ask yourself, even just during a meditation practice or looking out a window for 5 minutes, are your thoughts pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Are they thinking about loving kindness and compassion and joy? Are they thinking about anger, greed, ignorance? Or are they thinking about the floor or a shoe? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. So again, I can't tell you about what you're thinking. All I can ask you is to stop for a minute and ask yourself when thoughts arise, what is the motivation behind them? What is the intention behind them? We are thinking all day long. During your meditation, you are thinking constantly. The practice is to release the thoughts by coming back to this present moment. But when the thoughts arise, are they pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? This is what the Buddha taught. Do your thoughts bring harmony and peace and joy? Or do they bring more anger and hatred and rage to the world? Again, only you can answer that. So hopefully that's helpful. Other thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with? There's a great Buddhist text teaching, it's called the Dhammapada. And the first line of the Dhammapada is, the mind is the forerunner of all evil. So in Buddhist teachings, everything is the mind. Everything. It's not the physical body. It's not where you live. It's not what food you have. It's not any of those things. It's not the people you're with. It's not the clothes you're wearing. It's not those you can or can't hug at this moment. It's your mind. That is the most important thing in the Buddhist teachings, is your mind. So begin to get to know what are your thoughts. And that will make very clear what your life is going to be like. If you think pleasant thoughts often, your life will be pleasant. If you think unpleasant thoughts, your life will be unpleasant. And if you think neutral thoughts, your life will be neutral. So that's your choice. And that's the beauty of this practice, is you choose how you feel each moment. Again, regardless of the weather. Coming back to the Pema Chodron quote. The blue sky is there. The sun is there. Other questions, thoughts? These are always my favorite moments. And those of you who know me know, and I love it because, I've been doing this a long time, and every time I ask for questions and there's that pause. And it's my favorite moment because, as a Zen practitioner, the beauty is in each moment. And it's removing any notion of how you want things to be. As I talk about a lot, what I've learned from this practice, and I think the greatest thing I've pulled from it, is to expect nothing from anyone, ever. And that practice has been probably the greatest thing for me to work on. Expect nothing from anyone, ever. And there's always that moment when, I turn it over to questions and there's that pause. And again, when the room is filled with people, and I'm roaming around, and I see how uncomfortable people get in the pause and in that silence. And I see them, look around, and they look up and they look down and they crack their necks and they move their shoulders. And then somebody eventually asks a question. And then you can just see everybody relieved because somebody asked a question. And now I'm fascinated by this because there's probably that same level of discomfort, even though none of you were even here, right? You have a few questions, and I say, Any other questions? And there's the silence. And then there's that moment where people get so uncomfortable because people think, well, wait, someone is supposed to be asking a question right now. Why? Why is someone supposed to be asking a question? What is supposed to happen is not the point of the practice. What's happening is the point of the practice. So somebody responding to what I say or not responding to what I say is exactly the same thing. So for those of you who know me and have sat for years, I find as much joy in the moment here with nobody here. So I like to laugh at things a lot.
So a few people said that they felt uncomfortable about it.
Of course they did. Of course. And Travis just said to me, a few people said they felt uncomfortable about it. This is the craziest thing, right? You are all at home or wherever you are right now. And you couldn't even sit with like 2 minutes of silence waiting for somebody to ask a question. You're not even here. I can't even see you. I'm staring at the little monitor again. And yet there you are, uncomfortable in the silence. This is the greatest teaching. Begin to explore how uncomfortable you are in being with things as they are. Begin to explore how you have this fixed idea in your head of how you want things to be. I open up to questions. A few questions get asked. Nobody asks a follow-up question. And after 2 minutes, you're thinking, well, wait, somebody's supposed to ask a question right now. And now your whole world is anxious, right? How are you doing right now with everything else that's going on in the world? If you're anxious at 2 minutes of silence, it's how are you doing with everything else? Not well. I get it. That's why this practice is so important. Laugh at it with me. Laugh at how uncomfortable you get by yourself, or maybe you're with somebody, and 2 minutes of silence occur. That's the greatest teaching right there. In those 2 minutes of silence, you learned more about yourself than anything I could have said to you, or anything any teacher could have said to you, or anything any book could have said to you. And it is only that true, honest reflection of yourself that motivates you and inspires you to practice. Not just read a bunch of books, not just sit in front of a bunch of YouTube talks, not just download every retreat that's on the web right now because you're stuck at home, but actually practice. See what that's like. Clean your house. Do the things at home that you haven't done before, that you don't like to do. Walk outside, see what your neighborhood looks like. See what your yard looks like. See what your car looks like. Do the things that are in your immediate presence. Or watch the news 10 hours a day and freak yourself out. One or the other. But practice right now. Take care of things that are in your immediate presence. Don't just get lost in technology world right now. Because that's what most people are doing. Watching 8 hours of Dharma talks, I feel the same way about that as I do when people tell me they're reading 20 Dharma books. You know? Go clean something in your house. Go through your clothes, see what you can get rid of when the time is appropriate. Pull out your refrigerator if you have one, clean it. Do these things. Take care of things around you. Any other final thought or question before we wrap up?
So Rule asked if there's any evidence that reincarnation really happened.
Oh, I love the reincarnation questions right at 8 o'clock. It's phenomenal. Thanks, brother. I do miss you being here. And any evidence? Zero. So thank you very much. I'll say this in 30 seconds about reincarnation or rebirth or continuation of consciousness, whatever Buddhist terms you want to use. Whether it exists or not, whether it's real or not, whether you believe in it, this isn't just for you, but for everybody, whether you believe in it or not, doesn't matter. What matters is what you're doing right now. So, in Buddhist terms, we talk about positive rebirths or reincarnation. The only way you can control that is by your actions right now, right? Other ways of thinking, we think about going to heaven or hell. And if those are your beliefs, what determines that? What you're doing right now. So, some Buddhists would say, is there any proof of reincarnation? And they may say yes, because we're sitting here right now. So there's all the proof you need. Depends on who you ask. Some would say it's ridiculous. I say it doesn't matter. Do I believe in rebirth, reincarnation, and continuation of consciousness? Yes. Not because it logistically makes any sense to me or rationally makes any sense to me, but for me, I've looked at Buddhist teachings a long time, and 98% of it, to me, are like flawless truth. The 2% that make no sense to me whatsoever, like this, I just throw it in there and I say, I'm all in. And again, for those who may be brand new, and I'll close with this thought, 2,500 years ago when the Buddha was alive, when he was teaching, Siddhartha Gautama, the man himself as the prince and then being called the Buddha, he was just a human. And what everybody believed back then was rebirth or reincarnation or continuation of consciousness. So there wasn't a bunch of people trying to be convinced of whether or not it was real. If you told people back then that you had one life and you were going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. So he was teaching and living at a very different time where the general view and religion and way of life was Hindu, and they all believed in it. Fast forward 2,500 years, and it's not the common worldview today. It's definitely not the common, Western view today, but around the world, millions of people still believe in it. But again, I like to err on the side of caution. And I don't know if I go to heaven. I don't know if I go to hell. I don't know if I'm going to be reborn or reincarnated or my consciousness is going to continue. But whatever the outcome might be, I got to work on my mind right now because it's a mess. So I'll close with that. So we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. So a few quick announcements before you all turn off whatever device you're on. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened this temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice, meditation to local folks. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those of you who show up. So every night we have different classes going on. Our current schedule, the temple's been closed since March 12th. Our current schedule, about 80% of it is online. So we have our 7 o'clock Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. I do Tuesdays. Alex does Wednesdays with the Metta, Loving Kindness, and Travis does Thursdays with the Dharma Bum Basics. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights also. So currently right now we have our Recovery Sangha meeting on Zoom. Wednesday night, Pete does the 12 Steps In, and Thursday night we also have the Recovery Book Study. Saturday morning, I do the 11 o'clock on YouTube. We also have the Family Sangha that has returned. So if you're a parent and you've joined it in the past, or you're a parent and you just want a little sense of peace and quiet and sanity during this time, second and fourth Saturday of the month at 9 a.m., you can join other parents who are coming together to meditate and talk and discuss what it's like to be a mindful parent at home and bring it into the home life, which I'm sure we all could use right now. Our Sunday morning recovery is happening. Our teen group is happening. Our college group is happening. So like I said, about 80% of our programs are still up online. Go to the website, dharmabums.org, and click on the schedule and open up the event, and you'll see where it's being held on YouTube or Zoom or where it might be. Other than that, I don't think I have any other announcements. As always, to me, the greatest teaching: think good thoughts, speak good words, and do good deeds. So if I never see you again, please just practice that. Please be safe. It's a crazy time out there. Stay home as much as possible. Wash your hands as much as possible. Don't take this stuff lightly. These things aren't jokes. You know, it's a very serious situation right now. So please do your best to be mindful and practice within that. So thank you all, and I wish you all a safe, healthy evening.